All right. Thank you for tuning in to Watching the World. We're also privileged to be here with DJ Genesis of Detroit, putting this whole thing together. And we have none other with us, the criminal attorney of the year. I must say he's a heavy hitter. His name is Calvin Johnson, and I'm welcome to bring him on the show. Calvin.
Hey man, I'm glad to be with you guys again. Of course, my name is Attorney Calvin D. Johnson. I have been a practicing Texas criminal defense attorney for the last 24, almost 25 years. I've done cases at the local, state, and federal level. And I'm just here to try to help the people understand what's going on in the Diddy trial, answer some of your questions, give some viewpoints, show people how to get in touch with me. I'm attorney Calvin D. Johnson at gmail.com. I can be reached at 214-565-5600. My website is theywon'tletmeout.com. So we're here with Watching the World 777, my man Mel, who attends court religiously every day in the Diddy trial. So we want to get his real life viewpoints, and then I'm going to add something to that.
All right. That's awesome. So, this week, we had the closing arguments from the prosecutors as well as the defense team. And believe it or not, the prosecutors came back for another hour and a half. Almost seemed like a new direct on this case. They really made their points, right?
Yes.
So we figured today we'll do something fun. We're going to, just to give you guys, our religious viewers all the time, we're going to try to defend this case at a high level to give you an idea of some of the points that may have been missed as far as the defense on this case. So we're going to dig into it and see how we can build out these arguments to show you how someone of Calvin's stature, a criminal defense attorney, how he would approach this case to help his client to win and not go to jail for some extended period of time. So, Calvin, first thing I would like to get into is uh, point number one, or criminal act number one, is racketeering. Charge number one. Could you break that down? What is racketeering?
Racketeering is basically you're creating a situation where you can participate in multiple criminal acts or a criminal act, and you're setting up a situation where you can do that on a continuous basis. And you're using your position as a person running the company or running the organization to be able to continue to do that. And that's what they're alleging that Puffy is basically doing. He's allowing people and to do the things that he needs to get done. He's asking people to do things for him that's going to benefit him, and it allows whatever illegal behavior to continue. So it's kind of what you're going to be doing when it comes to racketeering.
The government basically said all you need is a group of people conspiring together. Now, Shapiro, who is a top notch appellate judge, she's a heavy hitter. She broke it down this way: in order to have a real RICO, there would need to be a distinct other enterprise kind of acting along with Bad Boy Enterprise or what have you. How should we view that?
Well, basically, what it is you have Bad Boy, the company over here, and then you got Sean Combs, the individual over here, doing other things, and you're allowing Bad Boy, the company, to help Sean Combs, the individual, carry out illegal behavior, and they're doing that together. And when I say Sean Combs, you have the organization and you got Sean Combs, the individual. What kind of happens is Sean, of course, has access as a company person to be able on the individual side to direct folks to not just do stuff that benefit the company, but to personally engage in criminal behavior, attitudes, and crimes on the other side. He's using that to do both.
Okay, so you spark a big question with me. So let's say, for instance, I'm in upstate New York and we have a guy named Frankie the Butcher. He's a mob boss. He's running an enterprise in Manhattan that's involving deaths of individuals from his camp versus, let's say, the Gotti family, right? In this case, Diddy does not have any blood on his hands. The only thing he basically has on his hands is baby oil and Astroglide. No blood. There's no murders in this case. Why would he have to be charged with a RICO that often involves murders and go away for 30 years to life when he's actually done things like domestic violence and, low level crimes?
I think what's happening in this particular situation is they don't consider kid sex trafficking, kidnapping, and some of the other stuff as low level crimes, robbery. They don't consider those things as low level crimes. The other part of the situation that people don't understand is the government, when it gets to the Fed level, they have a what we call a point system. So depending on, and I don't have the point system in front of me right now, but depending on what you get charged with, the higher amount of your points, the more time you can get. That raises your range. So in a state case, I can go and negotiate a plea deal, and we may have everything from probation all the way up to 99 years to negotiate. But when I am in a federal case, let's say I got a federal case and it's kidnapping, and the points for kidnapping starts at 50. And then if it involves weapons or sex or the other stuff, then it adds additional points. Well, if the 50 number comes with a 10-year sentence, I can't go below that. So I don't have that 0 to 10 to negotiate on. Only thing I can negotiate is basically that 10 and on up. And the more criminal behavior you conduct and become involved in, the higher the number goes. And so that's why when you get charged federally, it's really, really tough because the number can really get up high.
Okay, so a question I have for you. Rumor has it that Diddy had a previous felony from a gun charge around 2008 or 2010. Would that affect the point system if that is true?
It does. A prior felony adds 3 points to your score, and your score will correlate with a sentencing range. And just to simplify it to you, let's say 1 point, and let's say 1 point gets you from 1 to 2 years, and let's say 2 points gets you from 2 to 4 years, and let's say 3 points gets you from 4 to 6 years. And so what happens is, and I'm just oversimplifying it, the higher number of points that you have, the more you could possibly get sentenced to, okay? And the 3 points for each felony creates a higher number for him. There's 1 point for a misdemeanor if you serve over 100 days, or there's 3 points for a felony if it's a felony conviction.
Okay, so another question. If he's charged with racketeering, what type of time is he looking at?
Well, it just kind of depends. And with that, it's a little harder to say, because what happens is when you get hit with the racketeering, then they start to go over the behavior that's in your racketeering. Did you use weapons? Have you had prior felonies? How many prior felonies you've had? And so that range, you really won't know the range until until you get the conviction, and then until they look at everything. In addition to that, felonies involving guns, sometimes if you have too many points, because of that, it even raises you higher. So it's a little difficult to tell at this point, but he could be looking at anywhere between 10 and 30 years, depending on the additional stuff that they add. Now, once sentencing happens, there's going to be a sentencing recommendation that comes down from what we call the Federal Probation Department. They interview the individual after he gets convicted, if he gets convicted. They go over his criminal history. They go over the actual thing that he got convicted of. And then they actually come back with a particular point and recommendation in terms of the points. And then the state and the defense argue about, is that number correct? For example, in addition to the point system, there's also time factors related. So let's say one of your felonies is 15 years old and they can't use it to add points to your score. Some of the felonies kind of fall off when it comes to the federal system in terms of adding points. I had a guy one time and he got lucky because the last case he had, he got 25 years on, and then of course, it's like 26 years later, he's in trouble again. Well, all of the prior felonies that he had, they could not use him because they fell out of the time range. And so he only ended up getting about 5 years for what he did. But if he had not have had that big sentence on the last one, and they would have been able to include some of the prior stuff he did, he would have been looking anywhere from 18 to 30 years. And so that's why those things can make a difference. And with Diddy, you're going to be able to kind of tell based on his prior convictions, as well as the additional behavior and the criminal behavior that he gets convicted of.
So you had mentioned his guns. They did not list that as a predicate act, but I do have a question. When they went to arrest him, the guns were found in the security room, and it seems that they came out of a safe that held these guns. But some of the guns had been defaced. The serial numbers had been scratched off. How does the federal government view that?
Well, they can't really 100% prove that it's his safe. They can't prove that he actually had custody of those guns. And so they will allege that during the case, but sometimes they will not be able to add that on as something that can get him points or put him in another sentencing grouping, which is higher. The defense attorneys like myself are going to say, hey, whatever you found there, you can't say that Mr. Combs used the gun, that those things belong to him. He had care, custody, and control of those particular weapons. You can't say 100% that these things were actually used to commit this crime. So as a defense attorney, I argue to keep the guns out of it because it makes your sentencing situation higher.
Okay, so let's go through the predicate acts. I'll just list them off, and then we'll go through one by one to see how you would fight this in court to save the life of your client. Number 1 is drug distribution. Number 2 is kidnapping. Number 3 is arson. Number 4 is bribery. Number 5 is sex trafficking. Number 6 is interstate transportation for prostitution. Number 7 is forced labor. And number 8 is witness tampering and obstruction. Those are the 8 predicate acts on the table for the jury to consider. So number 1 is drug distribution. I just want to tell you briefly what the prosecutor said. She says that one freak off, you could have 6 or 7 drugs, but you only need one drug to have a predicate act. She said you do not have to sell the drug to an individual to be drug distribution. You can give it to a friend, and that's against the law. She also said when it comes to this one predicate act, that there were drugs at every freak off, and there were hundreds of freak offs, and all you have to do is just choose 2, and you have racketeering. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, number 1, if they can prove those 2 things, that's a huge problem for Mr. Combs. If I'm the prosecution and I'm talking to the jury, if I made it that simple, that's going to be a huge problem for Mr. Combs to get around. But I'm a defense attorney. So what I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do with that, how I'm going to argue that situation. I'm going to say that Mr. Combs didn't give anybody anything. The people that were involved in the freak-offs decided to take those drugs on their own. Now, even though I was present at the freak-offs, I didn't distribute anything to anybody. I didn't go buy anything for anybody, and I did not make anybody take anything. At the end of the day, these are consenting adults who decided to do drugs and have sex. That's going to be the consistent argument that I make as Puffy Combs' attorney. That's what's going to happen, and that's the arguments that the defense should be making.
Throughout the trial, they tried to say, like in the case of maybe Jane, that Diddy gave her ecstasy for the very first time. How does that affect it?
Well, see, that's going to be another argument for the state. Now, of course, the state is going to allege that, and that will cause, once again, Mr. Combs, a huge problem. But for me, if that's going to be a situation upon which where 2 consenting adults were together and one decided that they wanted to do drugs, number 1. Number 2, can you trust the veracity of Jane's testimony? Jane has been given a deal to make sure that she doesn't go to jail. she has to jump up here and say that somebody made her take this particular drug. The truth of the matter is, in these types of situations, if I'm arguing for Mr. Combs, is that people decide to partake in drugs. Drugs are not, a lot of these people are not one time, that's my only time, it's my first time using. This person probably already had some kind of addiction to drugs. They wanted to take the drugs. They took those drugs on their own, if there were any drugs at all. And so that's the argument that I'm going to make. I'm going to say, hey, look, we got somebody up here possibly hooked on drugs. That is going to make an argument that Mr. Combs made her take a particular drugs when we know that this particular individual has done drugs before. And as being an addict, when you know how addicts do, they decide that they want to take the drugs. Nobody has to make them do anything if there were any drugs, if she's even telling the truth about that. And so that's the argument that I'm going to make for Mr. Combs. It's on him. Now, if the government can prove and the jury thinks that young lady is trustworthy, that's a huge problem for Mr. Combs, because it makes it look like that you're providing her with an illegal drug. You made her take an illegal drug, and therefore you're distributing it. But if I'm Mr. Combs, I argue that that's not true, and she's only saying that because she's getting a deal. That's what I'm going to argue.
Brendan Paul took the stand. He was the gentleman that was arrested right around the same time that Diddy was arrested. He testified that the amount of drugs that he was arrested with were for personal use for Sean Diddy Combs. It wasn't some elaborate amount that you could distribute. How does that help the defense?
It helps the defense greatly, because I'm going to say this particular individual had enough drugs really for one person to use, or for one person to use over an extended period of time. Those drugs were for personal use. And that's the argument that I'm going to make. These things were not being distributed. It was enough for that particular person to use for that day or a couple of extended days. And so what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to say, hey, look, the amounts that they found is not something where I'm moving drugs to either sell or get people to do things. There was just enough drugs for somebody's personal use. And that's what that person was doing.
The government pulled out a chart, and in that chart, they show this criminal enterprise, Combs Enterprise, and they said, do not get it misconstrued with Combs Enterprises, which is the official corporation with New York State. In the chart, they show that Capricorn Clark, his chief of staff, also known as KK, there are times where she has Jane, and during a text message, she's saying, pick up these drugs from LA before you leave and fly to Miami and bring them. Jane says, I'm really nervous. Is this safe? And KK says, yeah, it's safe. I've done it many times. What do you think about that?
Now, let me tell you something, and that's the thing, right? So you got one situation where she's admitting that she has gotten drugs and transported them on several occasions across country. But can you really 100% attribute that to Mr. Combs? She is deciding to partake in an illegal act. We don't know what her situation is in terms of her addictions. We don't know what she was getting out of it when we start talking about that. And in addition to that, like I said before, she's making a decision to get somebody to do something. But is that 100% for the benefit of Mr. Combs, or does she have something else going on somewhere else? That's what I'm going to argue. But once again, if the jury believes that she was having these things for Mr. Combs and she was moving these drugs for Mr. Combs, that's a problem. But I'm going to argue vehemently that she probably has or could have her own addictions, and she could have been moving those things for herself.
Okay, very good. Predicate Act number 2 is kidnapping. There's 3 instances we need to briefly go through. Number 1 is Cassie Ventura. Allegedly, Diddy had punched her in the face. She had some major bruising, and she had an event coming up, what have you. She said she wanted to go to the house. Diddy sent her to a hotel room so that no one would see her and substantiate what could have happened. They brought her food the entire time. They, checked on her and so forth. Is that kidnapping?
Did they always have somebody at the door? Did it make sure that she did not leave? Did she say that?
Was not said, no.
Well, that's the problem, because if that was not said, You're just going somewhere. Number one, you also have the benefit of not wanting to be seen in the public. You are a celebrity, you're a star, you don't want to go out with a black eye. If he placed you somewhere and you didn't go somewhere for a week, but he didn't tell you you couldn't leave, or he didn't put somebody that physically put you in a situation where you couldn't leave, you can't prove kidnapping in that situation. Or you got to remember, the state has the burden beyond a reasonable doubt to prove that that's kidnapping. There's reasonable doubt if there's nobody at the door saying that she has to stay there, because the average person, if they want to leave, they're going to be able to walk out that door. So that's how I would make my reasonable doubt argument for Puffy. On the flip side, there is an argument to be made that, hey, you can't go anywhere because people know that you're with Puffy, and he probably has something to do with you getting hit in your eye. But at the same time, that's not really kidnapping, because you could leave if you wanted to. You have free will to leave. If he don't have somebody locked, some big giant bodyguard at the door making sure that you stay there, then you have free will to be able to get up out of there if you want to.
They painted a picture like she was being monitored, but they did not say someone was posted at the door. So I'm not exactly sure how that transcribes.
And see, that's the thing. If you're the state, you got to make sure that that's clear to the jury. You got to make sure as a state that, hey, if this young lady is being kept in this place, that we understand as a jury that she didn't leave, she couldn't leave, or there was consequences for her leaving or even attempting to leave. Did she even attempt to leave?
Okay.
That's an argument you can make.
That's a good argument. Great. It's so great to have you on board breaking this down. There's a lot of people in the building. Can you please just tell them who you are and where they can find you?
I'm attorney Calvin D. Johnson. I've been a practicing criminal defense attorney for the last 24 years, going on into my 25th year. I have represented thousands of clients, probably over the last 20 years, probably 5,000, 6,000 different clients. I've been to federal courts at least 30, 40, 50 times on cases. I do state, local, and federal criminal defense. I'm located in Dallas, Texas. My website is theywon'tletmeout.com, and my email is attorneycalvindjohnson.com at gmail.com, and my phone number is 214-565-5600. You can reach me there if you have questions. I do criminal defense in the Texas area, but I am licensed in other areas and other federal courts in the state of Texas, and I can actually practice in other places as well, depending on the situations.
I am Mel with Watching the World. I've been covering Diddy's case from the main courtroom every day for jury selection and also throughout 7 weeks of trial. I've been taking notes every day and bringing back consistent news to you guys. And Calvin and I have been breaking it down consistently every week, what we have heard and understand to be true about this particular case. Guys, please hit the like button. If you're on DJ Genesis side of things, like the button, give her a lot of support. She works hard to bring you high caliber people every day. She's consistent with it. Show some love and support. And if you're on this side, we're Watching the World, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe if you like what you're hearing. So let's get into the second kidnapping. It involves Capricorn Clark. Diddy had hired Kid Cudi, who was a friend, to produce an album for his side chick or girlfriend, Cassie. Okay. Kid Cudi started to get intimate with her, and Diddy found out about it 5:30 in the morning. He goes over to Capricorn Clark's house, banging on the door. They painted a picture. Maybe he was hitting her with the butt of the gun. Who knows? She opens the door, and Diddy says, why you didn't tell me, Kid Cudi? Get your clothes on. We're going to go kill this in. And then they proceed to go to Kid Cudi's house. She's in the car outside the house. She calls Cassie, says Diddy's inside of Kid Cudi's house. Kid Cudi's on speakerphone. He hears it. He calls Diddy. He's like, you in my house, in? He rushes over there. They're painting a picture that this is kidnapping because Capricorn was forced at gunpoint to come to Kid Cudi's house. The defense showed that there's no police report mentioning a gun, or when Capricorn told Cassie and Kid Cudi that he was in the house, she never mentioned a gun. She only mentioned it closer to this trial. What are your thoughts?
Of course, I'm going to argue, number one, that there wasn't a gun, and she would always talk about it. I always tell jurors, when you have something of a violent nature, whether it be a gun or knife or machete, those typically are the first things you mention when you start talking about somebody holding me against my will or somebody attacking me. You're going to mention the weapon, because if it's just their body, there's no fear in it. There's no illustration and there's no sense of urgency. When somebody pulls up with me on their fist and tell me to do something, I'm like, whatever. But if they got a gun, if they got a machete, or they got a knife, or they got a pistol or a rock or some brass knuckles, I'm going to mention those things, because those things are going to encourage me to do what I'm told. In this situation, without a gun, you're just an employee going over to somebody's house because you've been told to go over there. There's no kidnapping there. And in addition to that, you didn't mention the gun until close to the trial. When they interviewed you before, when you didn't have a deal, you didn't even mention a gun. Now, all of a sudden, you want to say you have a gun. To me, that's reasonable doubt. I'm going to make the argument that it's reasonable doubt. Number one, that you're probably not telling the truth because it's advantageous for you to lie. Number two, this isn't the same story you told all the time. Now, because Puffy's at trial, now there's a gun involved.
When they ask her about why she didn't leave, she says, "Oh, I'm afraid to go into the woods because there's mountain lions." So she mentioned being afraid of mountain lions, but never mentioned a gun.
Well, see, those are the things that I'm saying. You got to start thinking about how these folks are testifying. And then one of my overall arguments that I make, listen, let's be honest. Mr. Combs is a wealthy billionaire. A lot of the people that work for him, they live check to check, they live month to month. When the government comes to them, they don't have an opportunity to fight. They literally have to coalesce. And what you have here, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is you have the federal government stepping on their throats, and they didn't have any air to breathe in the first place because they didn't have any money. So they're just capitulating, they're bending and they're bowing, and they're going down to their knees because they have to. What's the alternative? If the government comes to you and tells you to testify and you say no, and they say, well, we're going to charge you in a RICO, and you don't have $1 million or $2 or $3 million for a lawyer, it can destroy your life, destroy your family, and take whatever resources you have. So I'm going to get up on this stand and I'm going to say what they tell me to say so that I don't get in the situation that Mr. Combs is, because I ain't got money like him. So that's what I'm going to argue to a jury, and when it comes to believability of particular witnesses.
The third point of kidnapping happened in New York. Diddy had borrowed 3 pieces of jewelry from Jacob the jeweler. It was a Jesus piece, diamond necklace, a bracelet, and a watch.
Mhm.
Capricorn Clark was in charge of bringing it to an event. She gets to the airport. She can't find the pieces. She calls back to 1440 Broadway in Manhattan, and she tells everybody, lock the building down. Let's search everybody for these items. She goes back to the building. They can't find the items. One of Diddy's security guards take her, I believe it was Uncle Paulie. He starts to check her out now. He takes her back to her apartment in Queens, where she lives with a roommate, searches the entire apartment. They can't find the jewelry. He says, sit tight. I'm going to come back in the morning to get you. He comes and pick her up, take her to 1440 Broadway. And at the time, they're in between 2 buildings. The new building is under construction. That's the building that he takes her to. She says that they go through the front door and they lock them in the building from the outside. So that's the first point that everybody in the room is like, oh my goodness. She says they go upstairs to the 6th floor. The elevator opens. There's a wide man about 5 times her size sitting at a table smoking like a freight train. And he says, if you don't pass this lie detector test, B, we're going to throw you in the East River. And she gets nervous. She starts taking 1 or 2. She does not pass. He says, you better calm down or else you're going to end up in the East River. She says she felt petrified. Is this necessarily a problem when it comes to kidnapping?
Well, see, this is the thing that you got to be careful about that. So after that, does Capricorn Clark continue to work for Mr. Combs?
Yes.
That would concern me. Don't get me wrong, but when somebody threatens my life, threatens to throw me into a river, The minute that I calm this little situation down, I'm probably not going to be working for that individual anymore. Number one. Number two, if that did happen, that does cause a problem, because at that point you're holding somebody against their will. But once again, um, uh, can she identify the people that were involved in and this happening? Do they have records showing that at that time this is what happened and this is where her phone was and this is where she was located? Was there any testimony about that?
No. But one thing that the defense did point out is that she says it happened for 5 days in a row. The Paulie guy would take her home, bring her back. And so he compared it to the jurors. He says, we have you guys here for weeks coming in every day, but you get to go home at night and come back the next day. Is that kidnapping? I thought that was a very good point. Point number two, there's no police reports for any of this. Your turn.
That's not kidnapping then, because if you get to leave and come back, you can come back. Hell, you just basically working extended hours. If that's the situation, number one. Number two, why are you trying to turn Puffy into the Big Red from the Five Heartbeats? That's basically what you're trying to do. If you don't know what I'm referencing, it's a movie. Guy got hanged out of a window because of some things, but that's basically what she's trying to make him look like. But in that situation, was there a situation where you and I can be somewhere for 5 days and nobody know where we're at? No, somebody's going to come looking for us, number one. Number two, it's not kidnapping if you get to go home and back to work every day. You got the freedom to leave. You have the freedom to make a report. You have the freedom to tell somebody, hey, man, these people are trying to kill me. And so somebody who threatened to throw you into the East River, you went there, left, and then came back after they said that they were going to throw you in the East River? Like Chris Carter would say, come on, man. Wait, really? So that's what I'm going to argue if I'm the defense attorney.
She testified that this happened for 5 days, and then come Monday, she went right back to her regular job. Diddy never said anything about it, never gave an indication that he knew about these lie detector tests or anything of the sort. What do you think?
Number one, they got to make sure that he's connected to it, number one. Number two, we're talking some jewelry. We're not talking a chain from Zales or Pearson Pagoda. We're talking jewelry probably that's worth $500,000, $1 million. If somebody you worked with could possibly take in $500,000, $250,000, or $1 million worth of jewelry, if you're working for me, yeah, I'm bringing you in here and I'm going to make you take some lie detector tests and I'm going to watch you like a hawk. Because if that situation occurs, then I'm on the hook as Puffy for $500,000 or $1 million worth of jewelry to somebody who's going to expect payment. And if you're my employee that was tasked with the ability and the duty to watch those particular pieces of equipment or jewelry, of course I can bring you in and look at you like a hawk and ask you a bunch of questions. But if you're going home at night, I'm not kidnapping you. I'm just making sure that you go from home to work, that you're not dropping anything off. I'm trying to make sure I get my jewelry back. Even if I'm connected to that, the people that work for Puffy, their responsibilities are to make sure that they try to recoup whatever's lost. That's not kidnapping in my eyes.
Predicate act number 3 is arson. So basically, we had the whole situation we started talking about with Kid Cudi. After the event where Capricorn Clark goes with Diddy to the house of Kid Cudi, a couple days later, there's a fire involving Kid Cudi's black Porsche. Someone came in and cut a hole in the top, dropped a Molotov cocktail in. It did not detonate as they expected because there was a silk piece of cloth that was put in to block the liquid fuel. Mm-hmm. It fell out and caused the gas to come out much quicker. And so it did not cause the house to catch on fire and the other cars. The arson detective said this was a targeted event because the car was close to the house and there were 2 cars behind it. So you couldn't see that from the road. Someone would have had to came in. Now, here's the key part about this. When they did the DNA test, it came back to a female's DNA. And also, they found 2 fingerprints that came off of the bottle. There was a 40-ounce Old English bottle of beer that they put the gas in. However, those fingerprints went missing. So, what are your thoughts of how they could tie this to Diddy when it's actually a woman's DNA?
I'm going to tell you, I'm going to say that they can't tie to Diddy. Diddy's not a woman. And number one, let's be honest. We know how these rappers are. We know how these rappers and entertainers and celebrities are. They got plenty of women that they talk to. When you think about it, even Kid Cudi himself is talking to Cassie when he know Cassie is still talking to Diddy. So a lot of these guys are playboys, and a lot of them have a lot of disgruntled women that want to get back at them. Who's to say that this wasn't a disgruntled woman who decided to break in his house and set his stuff on fire? Because nothing is connecting anybody connected with Sean Combs, Bad Boy Records, or Bad Boy Entertainment to say we did anything. So to me, that's not beyond a reasonable doubt. There's reasonable doubt there. So the jury should not find him guilty of arson because they can't prove that Sean himself or anybody connected to Sean put this thing on fire. In addition to that, it's particularly when you look at the DNA came back to some woman. So when you think about it, it's easy to surmise if you are a regular individual that it is reasonable that a disgruntled woman could have went in there and set that thing on fire like anybody else could. So that's the argument that I'm going to make there.
Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to pause before we get into the number 4 bribery. But in the comments, people are going crazy. But I want to make it clear we promised to do a defense show for Diddy because we have a criminal defense attorney present with us. So this is a good day for us to have a criminal defense attorney give you insight of how he would represent his client if Diddy was his client. So keep that in mind as people in the audience are really going crazy. All right. Number 4 is bribery. Okay. So what are we talking about with bribery? Well, in the video that came out with CNN, we see Diddy and what happened, what transpired throughout this event. Mm-hmm. One of the security guards came in at 2:00 that day. His name was Eddie Garcia, and he started to preside over what had occurred. So he received a call from Christina Coram and basically said that her boss was really drunk. He did something he regretted. He's not sure what he did because he was so out of it, and they wanted to see the video. Eddie, being a noble man at the time, said, I can't do that. That's against policy. As the day went on, he did send an email to the higher ups at his company to let them know what happened. Christina Coram then comes to the lobby and she kind of makes an offer to him that if he complies, they're going to do something great on his behalf. Then later, Diddy reaches out. This guy, Eddie Garcia, still holding his ground. Then, Diddy reaches out to him and kind of makes some offers. Well, even though Eddie did not want to make this video go away, his higher up, his manager, said we can make it go away for $50,000. So Eddie went back. He had the number. He said somehow they got his cell number. He didn't know how Christina Coram got his cell number. He reached back out to them, and Diddy was so elated that he would get rid of the video. And he said, Eddie, you're my angel. That was his new nickname. So the manager proceeded to get rid of the video. They gave Diddy the original copy of some sort. And Diddy gave them a place to come to a hotel where Eddie showed up to get the $50,000, but also to give him the only copy of this video, and they deleted the rest. Now, what are your thoughts as far as bribery? Because they said that Diddy actually gave them $100,000. He pulled out a money machine, counted that $100,000 out in front of him. He said that when he was leaving, they had to call his car because it was parked, and said Diddy also called his car. So then he felt like Diddy was going to follow him. He was really nervous. So all of this is happening. Do we have a case of bribery?
I'm gonna argue that we possibly could, but we possibly may not. I'm gonna tell you why I'm gonna argue that we may not. Did anyone make a police report of the incident at the hotel? No. Did Cassie make a police report at the incident at the hotel? No. Does the hotel have a duty to report an assault on its premises? A corporate duty, yes, but do they have a duty with the public? Was there an existing case at the time that this issue happened? No. This literally was money to avoid a public relations disaster. Now, I will tell you as a criminal defense attorney, Puffy assaulted Cassie. And in my eyes, anybody that assaults somebody like that, they probably should go to jail. But as a defense attorney at the time, and if we're just discussing the case per se, and if there was robbery, there are a lot of situations where owners of companies pay money to make sure that things don't get released. And to be honest with you, there was no crime that had been reported by Cassie. There was no crime that had been reported by anybody else. There was no crime that was reported by the hotel. And you have to remember, what did Puffy ask for? He didn't ask for them to not call the police. He just asked them for the tape. Now, if he asked them to not call the police, don't report this, I'll pay you all of this money, then, and I specifically say, do not cause a criminal case, do not report this to the authorities, do not, if I'm saying that is one thing, but if I'm trying to say, don't let this get out, let me pay you for that, I'll give you some money for that, is that actually bribery? It's not really bribery, to be honest with you. Now, in the alternative, if Mr. Combs is saying, don't report this, I'll give you $50,000. Don't let the authorities find out about this, I'll give you $50,000. Don't call the police, I'll give you $50,000. So that's different. In my eyes, I'm paying you for something that you have that I don't want to get out. But right now, when you think about it, there was no crime reported. There was no crime reported by Cassie. And depending on what Puffy was asking for when he gave them that money, that's going to be very, very, very important, because we have plenty of situations where people have bought things just so that they don't get out. But is that a crime?
Okay, so let's litigate it a little bit more. Diddy had requested that Eddie Garcia sign an NDA, and if I'm not mistaken, it was under Combs Enterprises letterhead. What are your thoughts?
If I'm making an argument for Mr. Combs, yes, he signed an NDA, but he's signing an NDA because as a public relations matter, I don't want to get this out. Now, if I have in that NDA that I want to prevent criminal charges, I want to prevent you from going to the authorities, I want to prevent you from doing all of this other stuff, yeah, then of course that's different. But if I'm a private individual working for a private company and I sign an NDA that this stuff doesn't get out, that's the argument that I'm going to make as a criminal defense attorney. Now, some people view this differently. Some people are going to go, the fact that he paid for it alone is bribery. But it depends to me as an individual, why am I giving you this money? Am I giving you this money to keep this thing from being reported to the authorities? Am I giving this money because I don't want a crime for me to get convicted of a criminal offense? Am I giving you this money just because as a public relations matter, I don't want this to get out?
So here's an issue that I noticed just from being in the courtroom myself, and the defense really didn't hit it. So I wanted to see your take. In the video where Cassie is beaten, there's a security guard named Israel Flores that comes out of the elevator, and you can see him smiling. He's the one that actually takes a video of the original video because he said he wanted to take it and show it to his wife. And that's the video that would ultimately got out. But he testified on the stand, and I was in the main courtroom. I saw him with my own eyes. He said he was a security guard at the time. He later became an officer. Okay, so keep that in mind. in closing arguments, when they're going through the video, the prosecutor is saying, look at Officer Flores coming out of the elevator. He's not an officer at the time. He's actually just a security guard. So to me, if they're arguing bribery, they should have been honest and said, here's the security guard coming out of the elevator. But I counted 8 times where she said, here, Officer Flores walks out of the elevator. Here, Officer Flores. I almost felt like she was doing it by design. Here, Officer Flores is talking to Diddy. Here, Officer. You see what I'm saying? So, what are your thoughts on that? Does that make a difference?
Oh, she was making it. She was doing it by design, and that's what they do. That's what happens. So security officers, believe it or not, security officers that work for private companies, they really don't have like a duty to report something that happens on the premises. They really work for the company. They don't work for a public entity. And the deal is, it's not semantics between a security officer and the public. If you're a public official, you have a duty to report. So if I'm a police officer and I witness a crime, I have a duty to report that crime. If I do not report that crime, it is a crime within itself. That's why when you have situations that happen with kids at school and a counselor sees some bruising, she calls CPS not because she always wants to, because she knows that she can get charged with a crime, because as a public employee, a public official, she has to report that. A private security guard does not have the same responsibilities as a police officer. They are a private security guard. A police officer's allegiances and responsibilities and duties lie to the citizens and the state and the particular public entity who's paying them. A security officer, on the flip side, they have a duty to the company and the corporation or the particular entity that is paying them. So as a defense attorney, I'm going to argue that that tape itself, that's a private tape. That's a tape from that company. There's no bribery there because he is an employee of a private company. And this is an agreement between a private citizen and a private company. It is not an agreement between a private individual and a public employee, public entity, a public organization, because that particular hotel is a private hotel that hired security that does not work for the public. What do security guards do? Security guards, they ensure what? That stuff doesn't happen on the property that they are contracted to work on. And it becomes more of an internal matter for that particular hotel chain, that whatever they got to do internally, they get to decide if they're going to A, handle it internally, or B, decide if they're going to report it to the public, to the authorities. They have no duty and responsibility to report that to the authorities if they don't want to.
Okay, so one of my schoolmates is in the building, James Martin, Just the Facts. He says obstruction of justice, paying someone to withhold, conceal, or destroy potential evidence, especially video surveillance, interferes with the integrity of an ongoing or foreseeable investigation.
Well, this is the argument. Is it an ongoing or foreseeable investigation? Number one, it's not ongoing at the time that it happened, because nobody called the police. Cassie didn't call the police. The particular entity didn't call the police. And we don't know if there was going to be an investigation at all. We just don't know that. And so there's going to be the argument on the foreseeability of the part of that statement. And it was not ongoing at the time that it happened. There was no investigation because nobody reported it to the authorities. Now there is an internal look at it. There's an internal look at it from the company standpoint, but there's no public investigation. It's a private company. That's what I'm going to argue.
Okay, my close friend from the courthouse, every day, that girl Henny, guys, go follow her on her channel, excellent channel. She says, questions, there was a clause to notify the company before talking to law enforcement so they can prevent the breach or get protection orders. Sound like that may be a problem in that an issue. Is that an issue?
It could be an issue. It could be an issue because in that situation, you're trying to and somehow maybe interfere with that particular investigation that's going to happen. But when it comes to notifying, once again, that's a private company talking to a private individual. So if they want to know, hey man, if somebody asking about this, I just need to know. So there's a bit of an argument there that could be something that could change the answer to that. Of course, the state's going to argue, hey, that's something that goes above and beyond being a private matter between an individual and a company, because now when law enforcement is asking about it, you're trying to make sure that you get a heads up. Now, the other argument to that is, I just want to know if they're looking at me. That doesn't mean that I'm not asking you to lie for me. I'm not asking for you to burn the tape up. I'm not asking you for not to give them tape. I just want to know if they call.
I am Miss Taylor makes a good point. She says, isn't that the reason why the hotel gave Cassie 10 million?
Exactly. Because they on a civil side, not on a criminal side, they have civil liability to make sure she's safe. And they have civil liability upon which, where if they don't do A, B, and C like reported, that they may have a duty to her. And they decided that they were not going to report it, which they don't have to. But she felt like that they probably should have reported it because they have to ensure the safety of their own guests so they can be sued. But that's in civil court. This criminal court.
Tyler Durden is really going in. Thank you for all your participation. Guys, please like the video so we can bring more people in the building to interact with, get their ideas. Tyler says, New York law defines the security guard's care responsibilities as a deterrence, observation, detection, and or reporting of incidents in order to prevent any unlawful or unauthorized activity.
I get that part of it. But once again, you have to start thinking about the responsibility that particular person has for the company as opposed to the state. And we understand that security guards are licensed by the state of New York, and it is their core responsibility when certain things happen. But when you say reporting incidents in order to prevent any unlawful or unauthorized activity, then they have a lot of leeway when it comes to that. Like, for example, if I'm a security guard at a nightclub and I see two guys punch each other and I see the guy who punched the guy first, do I always call that in? No, I don't always call that in. I think security guards in New York have a lot of leeway to either report or not report. That's what I'm going to argue as a defense attorney. Now, of course, like you said, today's show is about making plausible arguments for Puffy Combs when we go down this list about what he did or what he didn't do and what the requirements are to meet this RICO. As his defense attorney, I'm going to make the argument that the security guards have the leeway to decide what is unlawful or unauthorized activity, and they can choose to report it based on if they think it's unlawful or think it's unauthorized. And that's just that. And so I'm going to make that argument. Now, will all of my arguments hit home? No, they will not. But I'm just, as a defense attorney, we only get, the clients come as they are, right? So things have already happened. We didn't get to choose how they did what they did. We didn't get to choose how far they went or how far they did not go. But I'm going to make the argument that the security officers didn't have to report that. That's what I'm going to do. And more importantly, Cassie didn't want it reported, or she would have reported it herself. And the company that they work for, if they wanted to report it, they would have reported it. I'm pretty sure he talked to some higher up and they said, hey, what do you want me to do? And if they tell him now, we're going to leave it alone, because a lot of these private companies, believe it or not, a lot of these private companies, they like to give their guests the ability to remain kind of in the shadows sometimes. They don't want everybody knowing where you stay and what you do while you're there. That's what hotels are for, to be honest with you. For a lot of folks, they don't want information shared. They don't want sometimes what they're doing there to get out to the general public. And so you have a situation where you got Mr. Combs as a customer, Cassie as a customer. Maybe these two individuals didn't want that to get out. And they have an obligation more to their clients that are at that hotel as opposed to the general public, based on their relationships created by Puffy and that particular company when they rent that room there. That's the argument that I'm going to make.
Okay, Tyler Durden, just so you know, when it comes to the event we're discussing, it happened in Los Angeles, not New York. So it would be Los Angeles law. It was the Intercontinental Hotel in LA. All right, so we're going to get into the next two predicate acts, which is number 5 and number 6. They go hand in hand. Number 5, sex trafficking. Number 6, interstate transportation for prostitution. So, number 5, what is sex trafficking?
Sex trafficking is moving a person across state lines for the purposes of sex or or sexually related activities, right? So if I go from New York to Dallas, New York to New Jersey, New York to California, New York to Florida, another country into this country, that's basically considered sex trafficking. And that I'm moving these individuals with the purpose of participating in some sexual act or sexual behaviors.
Okay, so number 6 is interstate transportation for prostitution. What's the difference?
Or interstate is it basically. The other thing is what you can do, and sometimes you don't leave a state. Let's say you're in a state and you go from Dallas to Houston. And so the purposes of prostitution, which means you're traveling from one place to another to be able to participate in prostitution. So in Texas, we have 3 of the 4 biggest metropolitan areas in the country. We have Dallas and Houston. So we have a lot of situations here in the state of Texas where you will have a pimp in Dallas go to Houston, send somebody to Houston, and they consider that sex trafficking. And so when you start moving people with the purposes of engaging in acts for money, then that can be considered trafficking.
Okay, so when it comes to number 5, we're going to really unpack it now. And I'm going to give you 3 different scenarios because the government showed all 3. Number 1 was sex trafficking with force. Does the video, Cassie came into court, she says that Jules basically was in the room and she was trying to leave early from this freak off and he was dragging her back, so forth, to the room. Does that define force in sex trafficking?
Well, see, then that could be force. But is he bringing her back in the room to participate in sex, or is he bringing her back in the room to be able to, that he just wants her back in the room? And then in addition to that, is she having sex with him? She's having sex with somebody else, number 1. So I'm going to try to make that argument if I'm him. And then number 2, that's the argument that I'm going to make. She was already willingly participating in the sexual act with this particular individual. Now, the problem with that one is when you see the video and he does what he does to her and tries to drags her back down the hallway, that's an issue because that is one of the things that's going to hurt Puffy. I think that's his biggest challenge. That's why they wanted that video in here. That one's going to be a very, very hard one to get around. Now, as the defense team, I'm going to say repeatedly, there's text messages of Cassie wanting to participate in these freak-offs. Yeah, she's actually enthusiastic about it at times, and she definitely wants to participate in these freak-offs, right? She's constantly talking about wanting to do that, trying to do that, sounding excited about doing it. And so that's one thing that I'm going to argue if I'm the defense. But the video of Puffy Combs dragging her and kicking her and pulling her back down the hall, that's going to be a hard one for jurors to get past. And to me, that's one of his biggest challenges even though Cassie on other occasions had looked like she was either enthusiastic or wholeheartedly agreed with the freak-offs. But they only have to show one instance where it was done. And I think that's one of the instances that Sean is going to struggle with.
My girl Marie says he did not even bring her more than a few feet, though, not all the way down the hallway.
It doesn't have to be that. The fact that he's trying to pull her back in there, and the fact that she obviously wants to leave, and then the behavior of him kicking her like he did, that's a huge problem for him. Because when you look at it, sometimes, hey, you got somebody leaving the room, he could say, oh, I just didn't want her to, she didn't have any clothes on, I didn't want her to run out, and I didn't want her. But when you kick somebody and you drag them back in, he tried to kick her head like a football. A jury is going to see that, and there's going to be a huge problem.
Shanicia says, don't forget the text messages after the incident she blamed on the drugs. So basically, the argument was he had gotten hold of some bad drugs that day. That's why he was turned all the way up.
And see, that's the thing, too. Whether he's on drugs or not, if he takes those drugs voluntarily, even if they're bad, the responsibility of everything that happens after that is on him. Sometimes people, oh, I was high, that's why I did that. But if you made a realistic decision where, hey, I'm on cocaine, I'm gonna take this cocaine, but instead somebody snuck some meth or some fentanyl in there or some PCP in there and it drove you crazy, you can't then say, well, they slipped something in there, I didn't know what I was taking. But you knew you were taking a drug. So there's no excuses. And so when it comes down to it, when you look at it, there's no way that he's going to be able to skirt that domestic violence of kicking her and trying to drag her back in the room. And what people are going to do, and I'm just keeping it real, they're going to correlate the fact that he was physically abusive to her in that video to what's going on in that room. Because they're going to make it seem like, hey, if she tried to leave, which she did, look what happened when she tried to leave. And this is when he knew he was in the hallway. Imagine what he's going to do behind closed doors. That's the way a jury is going to think. And so for me, this is a huge problem for Mr. Combs.